So si mani sapra orokana kai height na luguru koriko pepek finish. Ori kamene toke moroman no even oriko pepek ro ser happy. Na ori rusim ne sera perese ori karapi ko finish no hapro kapuko igor se moro hasaro. Peranti mani sabi guru kuna kam. Iguru guru. Na si meri no gutina en pepek ya wani kan oro semi praia. Sigini blogori kama por seminar para kai.
You know, there's that phrase, putting the cart in front of the horse. I wonder if we can collapse it into horse carting or cart horsing. What do you guys think? Court horsing? Heart coursing? I follow somebody on Twitter, and I'm not going to say his name because as soon as I start criticizing him, he'll likely block me or come after me. And I guess coming after me is okay, but the whole blocking thing is counter what I want you all. So, I'm not going to say his name, but he had this thread. And it starts, this has a lot of replies asking for more information, specifically in the context of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So it's a thread, and he's replying to this, SETI people, please lose the advanced civilization thing. So this guy goes on, how do we... Guy, I use that term very loosely here. And that's not meant as a... Well, it's meant as a jab, but not against his manhood. Just against the fact that he's speaking for the people who want to dissolve all manhood and turn it into a womanhead of unmanhoodliness. This is why I do vocal exercises. Red leather, yellow leather. How do we end up talking about civilizations through these ideas of primitive up to advanced? There's a lot of history behind the construction of the ideas, but I trace the current popular use of these ideas through the history of anthropology to European colonialism. SETI has historically drawn on analogies from anthropology to explain cultural change, technological change, and first contact scenarios. However, these analogies often rely on outdated theories and ideas instead of the most recent scholarship. Now, that most recent scholarship, does that mean that it's the best scholarship? Just because it's the most recent, just because it's current year scholarship, doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best scholarship. Because you know what? People in current year are just as stupid and fallacious and malicious as people in all the previous current years. Because we're just one current year of many. And there will be more to follow. Current year has nothing to do with logically robust, scientifically sound argumentation, theorization, and ethical rationalization. Quote, SETI has sometimes used the idea of primitive versus advanced civilizations and considered such models of development as inevitable or natural toward increased energy use or expansion, for example. These ideas have actually become common sense for a lot of people. However, these unilinear and hierarchical models of change are holdovers from 19th century anthropology. They're unilinear because the idea is that they develop over time along a single path. They're hierarchical because they place those further along above others. So those who are advancing in what he calls energy use and expansion are seen as more progressed than those who are not as energy useful. Now, what does he mean by use? Because, yes, the expansion of 19th century European power was a brute expansion. It was an expansion of, let's say, energy, of drawing from the earth, of taking over the earth. But since that expansion, it has been going through systems of refinement. Now, just because the advancement of Western civilization was primitive from his position, he can call the whole thing primitive. But it's that very advancement that has advanced him into being able to call that primitive. What makes progressive thinking most regressive is that they don't want to admit that the advancement went through a period of expansion and then through a period of refinement, just like writing a novel, right? Let's say that Western civilization was a writer and they just wanted to write a novel that wrapped around the world. So they wrote the whole novel, wrapped around the world. Well, once you're done with that wrapping around the world, once you're done propagating that text, then you go through and you refine it. And actually, if you look at history, you'll see history as a dual play between advancement, refinement, advancement, refinement, advancement, refinement, advancement, refinement. To continue with this Twitter thread, as the study of human progress encountered emerging biological theories intended to explain diversity of life in terms of evolution, a progressivist social evolutionism arose which considered differentiation in human societies as equivalent to variation seen in organisms. I almost said orgasms. But organisms come from orgasms, at least our organisms come from orgasms, so that's a possibly forgivable offense. Forgivable offense. Here's one illustration I made of what these hierarchies of progress look like in U.S. and British Victorian anthropology and biology. You can see how the idea of cultural change was mirroring the ideas of progressive increasing complexity in biology. Postulates the Europeans versus the other, and then there's this rationality complexity. So increasing complexity means advancement. Simplicity is less advanced than complexity. How is that at all a novel idea? How is that something that belongs specifically to European thought? So you have technological, it's a progress from civilized to primitive, so savagery, barbarism, civilization. And then there's the religious progressive structure, which goes from animism, polytheism, monotheism, enlightenment. And then there's the biological from single cell, multi-cell body, which is a very firm line of thinking. You can't really escape it. To continue, within a hierarchy of all biological life, human beings were positioned as the highest form, and Europeans developed a parallel hierarchy of cultures in which their own society was considered the highest form of society. Now, I'll bet you more than anything, he believes his ideology is the highest form of ideology. He is taking the moral superiority high ground, and then trying to call out European superiority. But his superiority is built upon the Enlightenment. It's built upon European superiority. So he's looking down at the Europeans who were looking down at everybody else. But he's trying to say, well, I'm not looking down at everybody else, just the Europeans who were looking down at everybody else. The hierarchy that we're referencing when we say advanced civilization are explicitly colonial and racist 19th century ideologies that Europeans used to place themselves at the top. Now, this is the problem I have and why I want to talk about this. He doesn't want to see that the idea of advanced civilization has likely progressed and become more refined since then. But he wants to claim the moral high ground, saying, I am the refined one. But he doesn't see that he has been refined, that his ideas have been refined, that he's the bearer of refined ideas. Insofar as his ideas are refined whatsoever, they have been refined before he got to them. He didn't invent this all up. He's part of a continuum. And this is why I think that we need to respect our ancestors while still seeing how far we have yet to go. So wisdom is found in the recognition of how far we've come when we are looking at how far we've yet to go. That's wisdom, which is a code word for being balanced, centered, and humble in seeing that you are part of a continuum. So you want to actually preserve certain ideas and give recognition to those certain ideas that you want to preserve. Yes, criticism is important. Sloughing off the old ideas is absolutely important. Now, I would say that some of us need to do that more violently than others, and some of us need to be more polemical than others, or more vehement than others, and that's fine. That's kind of a neutral point, because that vehemence is just you pronouncing something that will either be obvious or unobvious in the future, will be either useful or unuseful, will either be very quickly outdated or very gradually outdated. But the fact of the matter is that we are all already going to be outdated. We're all outdated anyways. We already have like an expiration mark somewhere in some part of our body is this ticking expiration mark. So we're already outdated, and that's not just with our bodies, it's with our ideas. And insofar as we can carry forward the human project, I think that we form a unified humanity, not just in the present, but across time. And I think he wants to say that the Europeans were very myopic, but he's being very myopic in his myopicization of European culture. European colonizers believed they were the ideal. the pinnacle of humanity. And that by civilizing the other people of the world, they could help them to advance enough to become just like Europeans. That's what advanced civilization really refers to. Now, which parts of those ideas of European culture have sustained and have translated across culture? I would say it's technology. I would say it's communication. I'd say it's just certain principles, certain ethics, certain morals, and not the fluffery that's around them. The supremacist conflates the superiority of values with the synthetic supremacy of the form or the package that the values come in. And this holds true with both moral superioricists as well as racial superioricists. So there's a superiority, right? Let's just say that something works better than everything else in the market, whether that be on a biological level or on a technological level or on a cultural level. Certain constellations of values will work better than others, depending on the environment, of course. And that's a superiority. That's just blanket superiority. You cannot do away with that. Now, what happens in the translation of superiority into supremacy is that superiority, those who are holding those superior values, start to suppress and subjugate everybody else and claim that they are supremacist or they are the supremacy. And I guess that's what he's trying to combat. It's like there's this European superiority that conflated itself with a supremacy. The values and the behaviors that the Europeans espoused allowed them to become superior just by bent of brute force as well as refined thought. They became superior to every other country, and then they thought that they were supremacists. They tried to control everybody else, which is what I think is the problem. And yet, he's doing the same thing on a moral level. This guy's doing the same thing on a moral level. He's saying that his ideas are superior. He's taking the morally superior high ground and then trying to subject and subdue every other moral constellation. Be that tradition, be that religion, be that technology, everything else has to be subsumed into his supremacist view. He needs to enforce it on everybody else, including SETI. Not to say that SETI couldn't use this argument, but I'm arguing this because I think it's coarse. So this is just another one of those additions to the humanity. He's some sort of anthropologist. Whew. Good night.